With quarterback addressed, who will Atlanta target in the 2023 NFL Draft? An edge rusher? Or maybe a wide receiver to pair with Drake London? Let's discuss. All right, everybody, welcome back to Draft Brothers. I am your host, Jeff Hasley, and Draft Brothers is a Champions Round podcast, and we thank you for listening. I'm joined by my draft brother, Dan Turner, and today we have on the show Will McFadden, who is a writer and draft analyst for The Falcoholic, and he's going to help us understand what the Falcons might do in the 2023 NFL Draft. Will, welcome to the show. It's good to meet you.
Thanks, guys. I'm really excited to be on, talk a little draft with you all, and I'm glad to be here.
All right, cool. So I mentioned that quarterback has been addressed, right? With what you've got Desmond Ridder, picked him up last year, and now you have Taylor Heinicke. Is quarterback addressed? Let me just start off with that real quick, and let's get into this because there's a lot to discuss. All right, what's your take there, Will? What do you think?
Well, I think there are a lot of people here in Atlanta that would say quarterback is not addressed in the way that they would like. Obviously, the Lamar Jackson, the Falcons were the first team to kind of come out right after that non-exclusive franchise tag and say, nope, we're good. We're out. We're not even kind of entertaining this idea, which after a few days of speculation here in Atlanta about, oh man, could Lamar come down and be that Michael Vick replacement that everybody's been waiting for this whole time? Yeah, the Falcons put the kibosh on that, which makes sense for a lot of reasons. I just don't think it made a lot of fans happy, including my co-host on Believe in Falcons, Ovi Mihaly, a former fullback for the Ravens. He was really excited about, I think, the prospect of Lamar Jackson, but the Falcons seem very intent on giving Desmond Ridder at least a real legitimate shot. He got better in each of the 4 games that he played to end the season last year, and I think a lot of people really like the work ethic and just kind of competitive nature that he brings to the organization. Obviously, a longtime starter there in Cincinnati. He had success. He reached the playoff with a team that is not a powerhouse in college football, at least for a long time was not until he got there. So they want to see what they have. In Taylor Heinicke, you bring over a player from the state of Georgia, so there is that homegrown in that. And Terry Fontenot said, we've put a peach on, at least for the draft, every player from the state of Georgia, not just who went to UGA, but from the state of Georgia, which is, a recruiting hotbed. So there are a lot of good athletes from the state. But Taylor Heinicke is one of them from the past, and he's earned everything he's got in the NFL. He's worked really, really hard to stay in this league and get a contract at the age of 30, which people weren't expecting, when he set foot on the NFL gridiron for the first time. So I think they like the pairing of these two guys. I think they like the mentality that they both have. I think everywhere Taylor Heinicke has been, people have raved about his leadership. And I think that he will be willing to kind of take on a little bit more of that backup role and mentorship and push Desmond Ridder, really bring it each day like that is his game day and practice and really get him better. So it's not settled in the flashiest of ways. I do think the Falcons consider this settled because I think Desmond Ridder is the starter. Taylor Heinicke is the backup who can be a spot starter if need be.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, especially the way that you just kind of spelled it out. And at the top of the show, I said, well, the quarterback's addressed. What's Atlanta going to do? Maybe a wide receiver? So what's your take on what Atlanta does at 8?
It's a tough spot, I think, for this draft. And because there's not really some of the big name, it's top heavy, but it's not like 10 deep, I think, or at least with proven guys. When you're talking about the top receivers in this draft, right? Quentin Johnston or Jackson Smith and Jigba, like one didn't play at all last year pretty much. And even though his tape the year before from 2021 is awesome, guys like to see a little bit more than 1 year of elite film, unless maybe you're Jamar Chase, right? But and then you look at Quentin Johnston and it's like he does some physically dominant things, but like Atlanta has some of that prototype already. And given some of their needs somewhere, it's just hard to see how he exactly would fit into this offense unless they truly want a basketball starting 5. And if they're going to go 5 wide, it's going to be with dudes who are all 6'5 plus or 6'2 minimum. So wide receiver is iffy because of kind of that positional value. And I don't think it's a great draft for wide receiver overall. One of the first in a few years that it hasn't been truly great. When you look at edge rusher, which is their clear need, when you start talking about, all right, is Tyree Wilson going to be there or not? Like, then you get into, all right, do they like Miles Murphy? Do they like Lucas Van Ness? Is that the right value for those guys? Terry Fontenot has simply said, we don't really care about this whole value and needs and all of that. Like, if we think a guy is going to be a future Hall of Famer or a future Pro Bowler or whatever, we're going to draft him, regardless of if he's at a position where we already have a Pro Bowler. Like, we just want to add good players on our roster. But cornerback makes a lot of sense to me. And you look at Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez, and they're kind of right around that 7, 8, 9 range. They have AJ Terrell. They just signed Jesse Bates. They've got Casey Hayward for at least one more year as of now, but they could save money feasibly by moving on from him. I think they keep Casey Hayward in the mix as he's coming back from a pec injury, but that's not a ligament injury. And I think that they could look at drafting one of these two guys, get him ready, pair him. You can never have enough depth in the secondary, as they learned last year. Get him in there with AJ Terrell as your number 2 corner. Hopefully you then feel like you have your secondary taken care of for the next 2, 3, 4 years with Terrell, Bates, Richie Grant, whoever they draft, and then kind of figure out the slot corner or, your depth pieces after that. So that's kind of what I think they would do. They could potentially go after one of these offensive tackles, either as a replacement for Caleb McGarry, who remains a free agent, and we'll see what kind of goes down with that. But right now I would go corner if I was Atlanta.
We're going to talk Kyle Pitts here in just a minute, but before we do that, teaser, what player do you hope falls to 8 that would be just an automatic rush to the podium type of selection for you?
I think that would be Will Anderson. And I know a lot of people here in Georgia would say Jalen Carter, and I don't think anybody that would say that is wrong. I went to UGA, Jalen Carter is awesome. And maybe I'm overthinking this because on the one hand, I just said that Terry Fontenot does not really care about the position that they have for the professional team. He doesn't care what the depth chart looks like. He just wants to add good players. Jalen Carter, when all is said and done, I mean, he could be better than Grady Jarrett, right? The ceiling is much higher than what Grady Jarrett has been, but it's projection. So I'm not saying that he's going to be, or he is better than Grady Jarrett right now, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. With the addition of David Onyemata and Taquan Graham, that's now a pretty full defensive interior group. I expect them to maybe add a 1 technique on the cheap, maybe near the end of free agency, or somebody big to plug up in the middle, but they've got their pass rushing guys. Of course, you draft Jalen Carter. That could be your nose technique and also a pass rushing guy. He can just do a little bit of everything. But with Will Anderson, it just matches such a clear need where they needed a dude off the edge. And if Jalen Carter wasn't in this draft, he would be far and away the clear best defender. And to some people, he is, even including Jalen Carter. So that's where if he somehow managed to slip, just because the Falcons, I like what they've done on the interior of their defensive line. Now they need to get some juice off of the edge, and nobody in this class brings more juice off the edge than Will Anderson. So to me, if you're asking what is my run up to the podium, turn in the draft card, even though I think the NFL legally mandates that everybody has to wait the full 20 minutes before they're allowed to turn in the card, because I don't get why they wait so long sometimes. That has to be the reason. But Will Anderson is the guy that I would run up there at 1999 and turn it in.
If you like sports and playing sporting games, download the Champions Round app. Get playing and start winning. And use the promo code DraftBros for a free $10 and check out our newest game mode, Spicy Slips. If you love live sports gaming, the NBA, or you just want some extra action this NFL season, come play Spicy Slips. And now the NCAA tournament is available for Spicy Slips. So check that out. Build a 2 to 5 leg parlay of live props and win big today. All right. Well, he is Will McFadden. You can find him on Twitter at, real easy, Will McFadden. And he's a writer for the Falcoholic and also a draft analyst. And we appreciate you coming on here to talk about the Falcons. We can't talk about the Falcons without mentioning Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, man. Wow. All right. Dan, do you have a spicy type of question here for Will?
I do. So Kyle Pitts, the 4th overall pick a couple of years ago. So with the addition of Jonnu Smith, and we know Arthur Smith was his position coach in Tennessee. So what do we make of Kyle Pitts at this point? Should we worry about Jonnu Smith taking his work? Does he, line up out wide more because of the lack of, proven depth behind Drake London? What's going on there?
Yeah, I get where the question is coming from. And I think that Certainly. I mean, as somebody who drafted him to be on my fantasy team last year, I regretted that decision. And so I think if you're not a close follower of the Falcons, and, there are dozens of us, but I understand that there probably are others out there who aren't paying as close attention. Yeah, the Kyle Pitts performance last year was really head scratching, especially considering in the lead up to the draft, we were talking about him like, the next Kellen Winslow Jr., like that type of athlete, just dominant, going to be something like the league has never seen, a Shannon Sharp type of tight end. And that first year when he was with Matt Ryan, and obviously we saw what Matt Ryan did with Indy. So I think now looking back, the 2021 Matt Ryan was closer to the tail end of his career than maybe we felt like at the time he was. Mm-hmm. He still put up over 1,000 receiving yards. And consider when he was drafted, we all expected him to kind of have a little bit of time to get acclimated because Calvin Ridley was still in place. They'd moved on from Julio, but Calvin was going to slot in as kind of that number one, even though he's not a prototypical X, just the de facto like first option in the offense. Then Calvin Ridley decides to step away for mental health reasons and then ultimately is suspended by the league. So that goes kaput. Kyle Pitts gets a lot of volume, but he also gets a lot of attention from the defenses. So I think the first year we can chalk up to a lot of growing pains. Fast forward to training camp, myself included, all of the writers in attendance, that's all we were talking about. He looked great. He was doing things that I'd only seen Julio Jones do, and really making it look easy. So we all rightfully, in my opinion, kind of predicted a big year. The number one thing that I think held back Kyle Pitts last year was Marcus Mariota. And throughout the season, it became apparent they just weren't on the same page. Mm-hmm. Whether it was Kyle Pitts being wide open against Carolina and Marcus Mariota just airmailing a pass over his head on, I believe, a third down. Like that was kind of the story of their connection. And sometimes I wonder what, like, I don't want to assign blame because I don't know. I'm not in that building, but there was a disconnect between both parties at various times. Kyle Pitts is obviously part of the future here in Atlanta and Marcus Mariota is not. So I have to assume, some of that leads into it. Desmond Ridder, once he got in there, just found his guys. He was like, where's Drake London? I'm throwing to you 10 times in this game. Where's Cordero Patterson? I'm getting you the ball. I kind of expect once Kyle Pitts gets back into this mix with Desmond Ridder as the quarterback, we're going to see even above what we saw from him as a rookie because the talent is clearly there. Right. It's just the production that's not. But as we know, with receivers, with tight ends, the production is sometimes dependent upon another person. I just don't think the Falcons had the right guy behind center to really maximize what Kyle Pitts brings to the table. And I expect that to change this year and moving forward.
There you have it. That's a well-educated, informative, great answer in regards to Pitts. I think a lot of people are going to really appreciate that, Will. I want to mention just a fact about the NFC South. Carolina is slated to take a top quarterback in the draft, and the Saints signed Derek Carr. What does Atlanta need to do to keep pace with the growing and developing NFC South?
It's funny because, just a couple of days ago, you looked at the quarterback situation and it was Kyle Trask. Who was the one? Was it PJ Wilson was the one guy in Carolina?
PJ Walker?
PJ Walker, sorry.
PJ Walker, yeah.
Yeah, and Desmond Ridder and then like Jameis Winston or in New Orleans before Derek Carr. And now obviously like the moves that have been made, Baker and whatnot. So I think the Falcons have their plan and they've been sticking to it. And I think a lot of that plan is actually reallocating the assets from the offensive side of the ball and putting more of it into the defense. And that money has kind of just been locked up in Julio Jones and Matt Ryan and guys who aren't even here. I mean, I think Devontae Freeman's dead cap money and Desmond Trufant's like, we're still lingering, not necessarily last year, but not in the too distant past. That's kind of where the Falcons have been financially, is they've been really paying the tax for that 2016, 17, 18 all-in push. Now they've gotten out of that, and we see where they're choosing to spend the money. Obviously, some of this has to do with bringing in Ryan Nielsen and Terry Fontenot being from New Orleans and the defense that New Orleans has had. I think they want to have something similar-ish here in Atlanta. Big bodies up front. You can create a lot of pressure with your defensive line, and then you can focus on your coverage kind of on the back end. So that is what it has been more to me, is not necessarily keeping up with an offensive arms race or looking at the quarterbacks in the division and saying, well, now we got to compete with, even Aaron Rodgers, if he was to come into this, or Lamar Jackson. I think the Falcons really want to build a kind of whole complete team, the way that the Saints were when they were at their best. Yes, they had Drew Brees, but when they needed to and the chips were down, as long as it wasn't Marcus Williams against Stephon Diggs, they could usually count on their defense to make a play when they needed to. So that's kind of what I think Atlanta's doing. You're seeing that with Jesse Bates. You're seeing that with David Onyemata. Yeah, the Jonnu Smith, that was technically a trade. They're going to have to bring on part of that contract. But I think they view him in a weak wide receiver free agency class and a weak draft class. Let's just add weapons, baby. Like, let's just add some versatile dudes that we can get the ball to, that can make something happen after the catch, which Jonnu Smith can. And I think Arthur Smith knows how to happen. But that's kind of the one real, outside of Heineke, move that they've made. And Chris Lindstrom, the extension there. So I shouldn't neglect that. But adding to the offense, just one move so far. Defensively, I think that's where their focus is. And I expect that to be the focus in the draft as well, because I think Arthur Smith creatively has the offense locked down. Like, I really believe that they can make something happen offensively. So it's not so much about keeping pace with the quarterbacks or with some of these weapons that the Panthers just traded away, DJ Moore, which personally sucks because I just enjoyed watching him twice a year up close. He's a really fun player to watch, but this is a team that is trying to win, I think, as a team. And they're kind of not really worried, I think, about what other teams in the division are doing, because it almost feels like everybody's starting from a blank slate. And the Panthers were off to a great start solely because of what they had on defense. And I guess you could put the Bucs in the same boat. I think the Falcons are making steps to add to that side of the ball and hopefully get to a B- at least in all three phases. And then your coaching and your game planning and everything can turn these one-score games into wins, because the Falcons were in, I believe, like 14 one-score games last year, and they didn't have the record they wanted to, but they're close. I think they're a lot closer than people think. And I think they believe and they know that they're a lot closer than people think. So it's not so much the arms race. I think they're just head down. We're doing what we want to do.
Yeah, and you never know with the NFC, because it seems like everything is in the AFC. All of the tough teams that you're going to have to fight and battle against in the AFC. NFC's wide open. So, yeah, great answer. Dan, any last questions here for Will?
So you mentioned taking a corner in the draft, whether it's Gonzalez or Witherspoon. Do you have a preference for which one, if both are available?
I think I lean Witherspoon a little bit. And I was actually watching both of their tape today. I really like the tenacity that Gonzalez plays with. He's a little bit of like just a jitterbug out there on the field. He's kind of scrappy. He reminds me almost like an LSU corner in that way, where they play with a little bit of an edge and attitude. I think Witherspoon is just really polished. And I mean, you talk about edge as a tackler, Witherspoon brings it. And I think that both guys obviously play with swag and confidence. You have to play that position at a high level. The Falcons' tackling was a real weakness for this group. It's one of the reasons why I think they added Jesse Bates, because he is a solid tackler at the safety position. So given Witherspoon's kind of tenacity and just, he can play press, he can get up there, he likes to blitz off the edge, like he likes to mix it up. He likes to get physical. And sometimes I saw Gonzalez, there's the three guys here. I don't need to be the one to make this tackle, or I'm just going to dip my shoulder and go at the ankles and kind of make that kind of tackle. I like Witherspoon for that one reason alone. And I believe that both of them coverage-wise are really solid. I think both can do a lot of things that the Falcons would ask them to do. The Falcons just need better tacklers, especially on the perimeter. And I gave Witherspoon the edge for that reason.
Well, Will, you have been outstanding. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights on the Falcons and their draft. Be sure to follow Will with all things Falcons, of course, and the NFL draft. As I mentioned, his Twitter handle @WillMcFadden. And for those of you watching, we appreciate your support. Please do us a favor. If you like the show, give us a like, a subscribe, a comment. That stuff really does help out our channel. And don't forget to download the Champions Round app and use the free $10 bonus code when you play. All right. Thanks so much, Will. We appreciate it. And we will be talking next time about the Tennessee Titans and their draft options. So awesome. Thanks a lot, Will.
Yeah, happy anytime, guys. Appreciate you having me on.